For special people, we open special bottles.
This beer is actually older than me. 3 clay pots, none of which were made by Martin and myself. Malted maize, a load of hops, and a mission to make the newest, oldest ale ever.
This is the recipe from 150 years ago. That's why we drink beer now.
We're going to use dead whiskies to take a dead beer back to life.
There's never been a cask like this before.
I am going to Cantillon. Cantillon, top of the bucket list of every self-respecting beer geek, and a place that makes the best, most challenging, most mesmerizing lambic beers on the planet.
Of all the breweries on Earth, there is one so magnificent, it's been inspiring people to make pilgrimages to its doors for 115 years. That brewery is Cantillon, where fourth-generation brewing legend Jean Van Watt uses the same process as his ancestors, trusting the ambient microorganisms and not-so-microorganisms to brew his lambics, a style made by spontaneous fermentation. Then he ages them in oak or chestnut wood and blends them to create craft-brewed perfection. As Jean says, at Cantillon, there are no brewmasters because no man can master the beer. We just have to follow it.
Hello. How are you? I'm James.
Fine. Welcome.
Oh, you've got a dog. How long have you been making lambic beers?
Since '89, so 25 years, officially, because I was born here. My blood is red, but probably with some Brettanomyces in, you know?
And the whole process behind how lambic's made, with the fermentation, with the aging and the blending, it's completely fascinating.
Most complex beer style in the world today.
Yeah.
It's a beer with a soul, you know? We don't control it. We have to follow the beer. In fact, the beer will decide when it will be ready. The beers stay in the barrel 1 year, at least. And after 3 years fermentation in the bottle, only the bread survive.
Maybe see it and taste it?
Yes, sure. Here, that's a 3-year-old lambic. Lambic is really the missing link between beer, wine, and cider.
It's so beautiful, the sweetness in the front of your palate. You're getting the caramel, the toffee, some of the toasted oak in there.
It's very, very complex, very complex. My father is there with a very old goose.
How's your father?
That's my father. For special people, we open special bottles. This bottle is the typical goose bottle used in the 60s and in the 70s. Such a beer can age for a while. You can keep it for 20, 30 years without any problem.
This beer is actually older than me. Seems to have a lot more of the toasty character, but still underneath that, you're getting all the citrus, the apple, the pear, the Brettanomyces. It ages beautifully. I've drunk a lot of special beers in a lot of special places, but to drink these lambics yourself and your father here in Cantillon, I think it's the best beer experience I've ever had.
The magic world of lambic.
Cheers.
Cheers.
3 clay pots, none of which were made by Martin and myself. The help of one expert archaeologist. A handful of pine nuts we put our necks on the line to harvest. Malted maize, a load of hops, and a mission to make the newest, oldest ale ever.
So the great thing about this corn is because it's been malted already, the sweetness is already there.
A little nutty.
Because we've been grinding it by the fire, there's a little touch of smoke in there as well.
Here we go.
Easy. There you go.
Oh, it works a treat.
There you go.
It's getting hotter and hotter. Has no one got gloves?
So we've got some pale malt going in here. James is adding in the crushed maize.
Have you ever mashed in like this before?
I'm afraid I'm gonna break it.
If you break it, there's not a replacement. It's the only mash tun we have.
Smells fantastic. You get that kind of sweet nuttiness from the maize, that kind of caramel biscuit flavors coming from the malts in there, and some deep charred smokiness from the stoked fires.
To the oldest, newest wort ever made.
It's got a nice smoky character, bit of sweetness in there.
So we know we're extracting sugar.
You're also getting some minerality, which I think is coming from the actual pot itself.
Yeah, it's working okay. We're holding back the maize and the barley perfectly, so we're getting some nice wort coming into our kettle. It's quite hot.
It is quite hot. How's your hand doing?
Taking one for the team, the ancestral. It's too hot. It's literally burning. It's a great system.
Ooh, it was almost a catastrophe.
I think we nailed it with this second sparge, because that's about full kettle.
What odds do you think we have of getting this to boil?
I'm gonna have to go with 0.
What if we take out some stones and get it closer to the coals?
Or lift it up higher and get more underneath?
Yeah, we could do that. There's a huge risk it's going to do what the last one did, but we've got to get it to boil somehow.
What are we gonna do if the pot breaks?
I think they would cancel the TV show.
No pressure.
We're gonna need coals galore.
Don't start dumping them right through the top.
Just get as much as we can in.
Their fate now in the hands of the gods. The guys can only wait and see if their pot survives bringing the wort to a boil.
No way.
Actually, wait until it's boiling. The pot still seems to be in one piece.
The show airs. We've got Columbus hops and Mandarina Bavaria hops. So maybe a little orange tangerine citrus from the Mandarina Bavaria.
Big American hops and some nice aromatic German ones.
Yes.
And we've got the pine nuts going in there as well, and I think they're going to impart some bitterness too.
They're really quite fantastic ingredients.
Look at all the pine nuts and hops.
Wow.
Look how hot it still is. See the steam rising up? I think now's maybe a good time to stop.
Nice, that's worked really well. So we've got all the hops retained in here and the pine nuts as well. We've lost a little bit of heat by transferring into this cold pot. The next stage is to then transfer the pot into the cold water to try and cool it down to a temperature we can pitch the yeast. So we'll just pitch a little bit in.
So this yeast is going to turn this wort into the newest, oldest beer ever. I don't think anyone's made a beer like this, and after today, I can kind of see why.
Job well done.
We've taken the beverage that we love, the thing that we've dedicated our lives to, and taken it right back to its very origins, to the newest, oldest ale ever.
Cheers.
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 In terms of the London beer scene, I think no one really helped develop it more than Evan O'Riordan at the Colonel. And that's where we're going to head today.
And I think the most important thing about the old recipes for us is that they're all London recipes.
Yep.
And one of the travesties of brewing is that there was a great history of brewing throughout these islands that kind of, in many cases, just got lost by the wayside. And in London especially, it was just, except for Fuller's obviously now, there was a whole history and tradition of brewing that was just completely eviscerated. And whole styles of beer like porter and stout being quintessentially London things that were developed and they evolved in London. And in the mid-70s, I think they were almost extinct through the whole country. Apparently there's a point in the 70s where there was no porter being made here on the British Isles. Something like Anchor Porter was, somebody going around, mucking around old archives and making a beer.
Yeah. So how did you get into, I guess, the concept of this beer?
My exposure to these came through a homebrew club that I was one of the founding members of, the London Amateur Brewers. Again, the state of brewing in this country being so appalling that there wasn't even a homebrew club in London.
Okay.
There was one homebrew club. They produced these pamphlets, one of them, which they still produce now, which is called Old British Beers and How to Make Them. And they scale everything down to 1 gallon homebrew size.
Yeah.
There was 2 guys who were in this Durden Park Beer Circle who came to our London Amateur Brewers Homebrew Club. One guy called Mike, who was one of the loveliest men that I know, and he brought in a recipe that he'd taken from the Durden Park Beer Circle. It was a Flowers Christmas Stout, 1870 recipe. And we were kind of like, yeah, what's this old stuff? And it was just mind-blowing. But that was my first exposure to these old recipes. And then suddenly, things just make sense. It's like, well, okay, that's why, this is the recipe from 150 years ago. That's why we drink beer now. Because beer then was really good.
Yep.
And okay, we lost sight of it a bit along the way, but these things are still out there.
And how did the guy get the recipe?
One of their members spent a lot of time going into archives and deciphering things. Most brewers kind of kept records, like I'm sure you do, but in the old days with handwriting and secrets and stuff, they would just make things very impossible for anybody else to understand, I think on purpose.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just things like weights and measures that we don't use anymore, like bushels. Throw in a couple of bushels of what? And and sometimes the malt might be just named after the field it came from or the place. And if you don't know what that field is or that place is, it's just a confusing word in the middle of a sentence that you just don't understand.
Yeah.
So this is 9.3. Which, wasn't an unusual strength back in the day. Cheers.
Cheers.
There's quite a contemporary love affair with pastry stouts. Big, sweet, marshmallow, vanilla, chocolate, all those lovely dessert things, donuts, I don't know, whatever, s'mores. Whereas these old recipes are dry. Especially the wood aging dries it out even more.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, you're giving somebody just a different version of what a barrel-aged big imperial stout might be. And that's kind of, that's the bit that I like, that kind of, that slight catch or rasp at the end that makes you kind of, like, we had somebody come up to us and tell us this was refreshing. And it's like, yeah, no. It's 9.3% big stout, but yeah, we want it to be refreshing rather than heavy. cloying, sweet. Because often with these beers as well, you get this really lovely interplay between the bitterness from the hops and the bitterness from the dark malt, and one starts turning into the other. And this one also has a bit, it feels like the wood is adding a bit of bitterness as well with the tannin or the astringency.
Duncan Taylor have got the most exquisite and elusive collection of Scotch whiskies anywhere.
We're here to find 3 whiskey casks from 3 closed distilleries.
We're going to use dead whiskies to take a dead beer back to life.
How you doing, Ewan?
How you doing, boys? Long time no see.
Well, we've used a lot of your whiskey casks in the past to age our beer in, but today we're after something quite special.
Just have a nose of that.
Can we actually taste it?
Yeah, of course you can taste it.
So this is Lochside 1964, so this
That's
whiskey's
64.
over 50 years old.
Yeah.
It's a lot of kind of vanilla custard in the aroma.
Yeah, yeah.
The texture that it leaves in your mouth, it's like clotted cream, and it leaves a coating all over your mouth. It's absolutely incredible.
Cheers, Slàinte. The next whiskey is Capardonnach. So this is actually a 1968, as you can see. Once again, it's a pretty old whiskey. This distillery closed in 1999, demolished in 2011. It's a typical Speyside, very sweet.
Yeah.
Just hits your nose immediately.
I love this whiskey, huge hit of butterscotch, there's a nice spiciness. So Duncan Taylor are famous for having casks that are so elusive that no one else has any of these whiskies, and among those, Kinclaith is legendary.
The Kinclaith is the rarest of the rare. Only produced from 1958 to 75, produced in very limited amounts. So, you know, what you're about to taste is, as you can see with the sample,
Yeah, the amount's going down.
you know, you're getting a wee bit more Capardonnach than Kinclaith.
How much would a bottle of Kinclaith on this scale cost?
The Macallan that we've got in there, the 69, we sell at $22,000 a bottle.
$22,000.
Yeah. So this is even more rare, so you can imagine what this is likely to be.
So not only is this from an extinct distillery, it's one of the most difficult to find whiskies on the planet.
I doubt if there's another cask in Scotland other than what we've got. Right, here we go. This is a Kinclaith, 1969. So that's the biggest dram you've ever had.
Maybe $500 worth of whiskey in this glass.
Probably more than that, to be honest.
So although it looks like you're the quintessential stingy Scotsman, you're actually a very generous Scotsman.
Just go on, nose that. Just give it a blast.
It just sucks you in and
Yeah.
spins you about, and every time you nose it, it's almost like peeling back an onion. There's more flavours and more complexity there.
Yeah.
You've got sort of light, fresh, fruity flavours. You've got some more wintry, Christmassy, sitting by the fireside flavour.
You and this whiskey is so mesmerising, we simply have to use a Kinclaith cask.
And so you shall.
Well, I think we've found 3 amazing whiskey casks, the Capardonnach, the Lochside, and above all, the Kinclaith. Ewan, if we could use those to mature our beer in, that would be incredible.
We've got Capardonnach, Lochside, and Kinclaith.
So Ewan's explained it. We'll be assembling all this into one cask.
Yeah.
Well, I'll make a start, and then if I need assistance, I'll let you know.
The ancient art of coopering takes intelligence, skill, and a serious amount of muscle.
Okay, if you just like to pile them along here, a nice kind of pile, maybe 4 or 5 wide, and come out the way. Oh, no.
I wouldn't trust them.
And Ewan, this one has got fresh wood on the inside rather than the char. Why is that?
Sometimes you use fresh wood, or you'll use charred wood. And if you char it, it allows it to mature slightly differently. And you can see the penetration there of the whiskey into the actual wood. That's a catalyst for maturation.
Selecting staves from each of the 3 defunct distillery barrels, Nick gets started coopering up the guy's super cask.
You've no idea how difficult this is.
While they try their hand at building their own.
Nick, is this looking okay?
Pretty effective, you're doing well.
Oh, careful.
Have you ever caught your thumb when you've been hammering? Oof, yes. But I love the effect we've got inside with the toasted wood from the Kinclaith and then the Capardonnach and some of the Lochside staves that are more heavily charred.
Would you like to pop in this end?
This is just the easy bit that I can do for TV, huh?
Yep, definitely. Keep your left palm on here and kind of work this in with the heel of the hammer.
Okay.
Bit firmer.
Right, get a wallet. Get a right wallet.
Martin, I've got it about 80% the way there.
Okay.
Why don't you finish it off?
Hey!
It's hard to imagine that there's ever been a cask anything like this before.
There's never been a cask like this before. I think it's only fitting that we use some of this amazing Kinclaith whiskey to baptise this cask for its next journey for beer maturation. Oh. That's it.